Welcome to the Global Village Show, where we explore the other limits of human consciousness and the fascinating world of spiritual growth, success stories, and mystical happenings from around the globe. I'm your host, Dr. Douglas James Cottrell, and our guest today is author Audrey Gale. Her newest book, The Human Trial, is an amazing novel about vibration and how we all seem to resonate with vibration and frequency and so much more. This is an exciting novel. I'm really interested in finding out more about Audrey and how she came to write this exciting book. Good morning, Audrey. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me today. Yes, it is an exciting book because it's kind of the culmination of a long period of my life. The way I came to writing this book, The Human Trial, which, as it sounds, has some medical basis as well as some, now this, I don't want to scare anybody, but some quantum physics basis, um, which I'll get to. It's really not as complex as it sounds. Um, it started out in my mid 30s when I was still living in San Francisco, and I got a terrible infection throughout my body. All my limbs were swollen and sore and painful, and you could see them. You could count them down your arms. You could count them up your shins. It was pretty scary, and I went to my internist, my MD at the time, and he sent me to every single specialist you've ever heard of, the oncologist, the exotic disease specialist. I don't know, seems like there were hundreds of them, but there was probably a handful. And nothing they did had any effect whatsoever on my swollen, painful lymph glands. So a guy that I worked with at the time said to me, I know you haven't exactly asked me what I think you should do, but if you did, I would tell you to come with me to my acupuncturist. So we were in San Francisco. We went across the bay to Oakland. We went to a duo, two Chinese doctors named Dr. O. The first was the acupuncturist, and she stabbed one of these swollen lymphs and said, I don't care what you call it, you have infection all over your body. And so she gave me an acupuncture treatment and then sent me next door to her brother, who was the herbalist, the Chinese herb doctor. And he mixed me up a pretty stinky concoction of dried herbs in a formula and told me to go home and eat nothing else but vegetable smoothies with as much onion and garlic as I could tolerate, and this powder, of course. And the good news was I could have it multiple times a day. But I have to say it was a miracle. It was miraculous. There's no other word for it. Overnight, my lymphs were noticeably declining in size and painfulness. And you could just watch my body heal.
So that's enough to make anybody from your banking background, an analytical background, a traditional background, when you see evidence of, oh my God, something mystical happened like this, somebody gave you some herbs, I'll bet you they weren't very nice tasting either. They probably had some really bitter taste, having some experience myself. All of a sudden, you have this evidence that your lymph glands, the phloema, whatever is, our lymph glands and the poison and toxins inside is dissipating and leaving. Now, were you dizzy? Did you have headaches? Did you have any side effects, or it was just amazing? There it was.
I didn't have any other symptoms that I can recall at this point, besides just the soreness all over my body. I mean, it was painful to put my arms down. So, my body looked horrible. It felt terrible. And after the herbs and the acupuncture, I went back to my MD and I said, I'd like you to examine me and tell me what you think. And what he thought was, what have you been doing? And when I told him acupuncture and herbs, he said, well, I think there's a place for both in the world. I think traditional medicine is when your body can no longer fight, and Eastern medicine is when it still can. Now, I think that's I don't totally agree with that, but it is one way of looking at it. So that was the beginning of my eyes and mind opening. And it
That,
went on from there.
yeah, I call that the wake up moment, Audrey. Myself included, everybody that I've spoken to, we've had some very famous people on the show, and over the 50 years I've been involved in this metaphysical, spiritual, let's say, natural health movement. I'm a advocate for handicapped kids. There's always a wake up call. There's always an alternative. There's always something that can be done. And so you have the evidence that this was an amazing experience. Of course, there's a lot more to be said for that. But how did you get from that moment to writing this amazing book that's called The Human Trial? By the way, I love that title. I
Yeah,
think we're
thank
on
you.
trial the whole lifetime. I just love it. But anyway,
Exactly right. Yes, the double entendre, not missed on you.
so tell us, how did you get started? It starts off as a novel in the 1900s, and I was intrigued by that. So, not to give the whole book away, people can get it on Amazon, I'm told, and it's called The Human Trial by Audrey Gale, just to give you a little nudge here for people out there to maybe have a look at it. But tell us, how did you get from this amazing health experience to becoming an author?
Well, there's two things. I think in the back of my mind, my entire life, I thought, well, someday I'm going to write. I have a book from grade school that I got a B plus on, which is shocking because I did all the illustrations and all the wording. It was really cute. Anyway, so I
Good
think
for
in the
you.
back, the back of my mind, writing was always going to be a thing. But because I've come from a family of girls, there's five of us. I have four sisters. And everything changed when my dad left the house. Everything changed when my dad came home. I did have a big curiosity about what does he do when he leaves that makes him so important.
Yeah,
So I did get an undergraduate degree in business, and I did go out into the business world. I worked in corporate banking for 20 some years. But when I tired of the gamesmanship that is sort of required, if you're not going to play the game, you're not going to do well, so you might as well stop, which is
yeah.
what I did. And I went back to school and I got my master's in writing at the University of Southern California and had to write a novel to graduate. So that was my first book called The Sausage Maker's Daughters. And I used my initials at that time. It's by A.G.S. Johnson. Um, but this book then so from my early experience of my own health situation, I then moved to Los Angeles. I was just coming for a year, and it's been, decades since. But my dog got very sick, and it was kind of a weirdly similar thing. She's a golden retriever. She was 13 years old, and she had kind of like oozing, swollen skin. And I
Wow.
went to multiple vets, and they all said the same thing. Put her down. She's had a long life, blah, blah, blah. Which I could not do because she was my only friend in Los Angeles at that point. So I found a holistic vet, and he did a lot of different things. He did chiropractic and acupuncture, and then he started using sound vibrations and recordings of certain sounds. And lo and behold, just like my situation with the lymph nodes, that dog started to improve immediately. And she lived for 3 more years and died of arthritis and just general old age.
Mhm. Well, that was
But
amazing.
there was one, go ahead. I'm sorry, don't mean to interrupt.
No, I say that's amazing. This is, I think, leads you down the path of vibrational healing and well, Rife work and Della World's work on vibrational healing. But I mean, for the dog on its last legs, everybody says put the dog down. Of course, your heart breaks. Everybody has a pet, especially when you're alone. It's your best friend.
It's my only
Yeah,
friend.
there you go. So how could you do this to your best friend? So you had I'm going to compliment you. You had the forethought, the initiative to go and look beyond the ordinary, let's call it. And you reached out to some extraordinary people who provided alternatives, not necessarily what we think is alternative health, but alternatives, period. And your dog responded. Again, you had the evidence. It's an amazing
And
story.
you're right. I think the takeaway from all of this is you have to take responsibility. You have to ask a million questions. You have to consult multiple experts, multiple approaches, and have a million questions to ask each one, and then you have to decide. What sealed the deal for me when I could no longer pretend that the universe wasn't speaking to me, because it really was when my dad was diagnosed with leukemia and came to my house after his first and last chemotherapy treatment. And
Oh my
he said, I don't care, Audrey, don't care. I am not doing that again. I would rather die. So, just like I had been sort of led by the hand, I said, if you ask me what I think you should do, I would take you to my vet. And of course, my dad, being the spiritualist engineer in the family, said, sure, well, okay, what have I got to lose? So off we went to the vet, and he made him, he explained, now you mentioned Royal Rife, and that's really where this all goes back. But he explained that Royal Rife and his cohorts had discovered the signature frequency of diseases, and each one had its own signature frequency. And then he further discovered that if you could recreate that frequency, and just shine it on the diseased body, it would overwhelm the disease microbes, and your natural immune system, your natural body functions would just slough them out over a short period of time. And the magical thing of it was that it didn't touch anything else in your body, which means there are no side effects, which is kind of a questionable term in itself, in my opinion. Um, there's nothing invasive, there's nothing painful, there's nothing that's going to come back in 3 or 10 or 5 or whatever number of years in a more virulent form. It leaves all the healthy tissue where it found it, healthy and working, and does seem to boost your immune system at the same time. So that was when I really made the deep dive into Royal Rife, into the people he worked with, into their history. And I determined that I was not really qualified or positioned to write a scientific book, which you probably are, Dr. Douglas, but I am not.
the field's wide open. I'm not going to say yes, I am. I'm going to say I'm learning all the time. But some of my books are behind me here. But the point being is that uh, you discovered alternatives. Your dad was wise enough to go along with and check it out. He wasn't closed-minded. He didn't prejudge it. Then he finds results. And as you delve deeper into the alternatives, as I have done, Delaware's work, uh, the Rife has been familiar for me for years, and we've had friends and clients who have responded just like your dad. The thing is, it's not painful, it's not evasive. It only affects the dis-ease in the body. And in my opinion, maybe you will concur. This is all about you, mind you. But when you have a dis-ease in the body, you have a vibrational deficiency. And so the Rife would go and would affect the
Yeah,
dis-ease that's vibrating at a disruptive frequency, and I'm going to say vanish, make it disappear, and then it would reinstill or reinstate the vibration that was proper. And oh my gosh, magic healing happens. Now, that's my
magic.
personal opinion. Yeah, maybe you agree or don't agree with that, but it seems to be you're onto something. And again, as you say, you realize you have limits, but your most important thing was your curiosity, I would think, Audrey. You were
Oh, thank you.
you were looking into this, and because your father's life was at stake, and also your best friend, your golden lab retriever, and also yourself having experiences, I think you were guided from above. On this show, we explore the human consciousness, or the unlimited human consciousness. I think maybe you were guided a little bit. What do you think?
I think absolutely, without question. I have posited the question, did the universe curse me or bless me with this information? Because it has been dangerous, and maybe it still is to some degree. You're coming up against some very powerful companies and organizations, and even our own government, that are interested in keeping the status quo. And when you think that we spend billions and billions and billions. I have the number right here. What is that number? 2.5 trillion? Um,
It's more than I can count.
$2.5 trillion a year, something utterly ridiculous. I don't have the number at my fingertips, but I could find it. But anyway, yeah, 2.5 trillion per year. And that's in the United States, folks. So, it's a heavy burden. Um, that we are doing something so wrong. So let me just finish my story on my dad because it's really powerful and it really is what finally pushed me into saying, I don't care what it takes, I'm going to understand this. So he went back to his, okay, so the vet made him a cassette tape. Back in the day, cassette tapes. And my dad took it home and played it on his cassette player, and he immediately started feeling wonderful again, or so much better. He just kept improving. And I think it's exactly what you were speaking of, Dr. Douglas. The disease in the body is like a symphony out of tune. And it's getting all the players within your body, the trillions of cells having a billion reactions every second, it's getting them all back into alignment. And they're playing their parts perfectly at the right time, knowing when to come in and when to go out. The second thing is he went back to his medical doctors and they said, wow, that is the damnedest case of spontaneous remission we have ever
Ah,
seen.
I've
Yeah,
heard that word a lot.
because we don't, cure is a four-letter word.
Yes, yes, that's exactly right.
Cure is a four-letter word. We would never say that.
Okay,
So,
listen,
so
hold that thought. Tell everybody we can get your book, The Human Trial. It's on Amazon. Is it available elsewhere? You have a
it's
website?
available everywhere books are sold. Your bookstores may not have it in stock, but they can order it. And it's called The Human Trial by Audrey Gale, 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 like the wind. And
Okay,
you can get it anywhere but Amazon for sure.
okay, hold that thought. We'll be right back. Remember, everybody, please be so kind as to do me a big favor. Click the subscribe button on your social media so you don't miss out on our next exciting Global Village shows. Remember, it's free. I love to have you give us a thumbs up and stay tuned for part two. We'll be right back.